So this is a tutorial on headshots and taking 18 megapixel images and playing around with them in Lightroom. So we're going to bring it into Lightroom and we're going to make a new folder in Lightroom that we're going to have our assets in. Bring it in, import all of them, and then find our image. Once we find the actual image, we're going to develop it. In developing, you'll notice that it's a little bit too bright and there's a little aberration or there's errors in the lens itself because it's too bright for my lens in an environment like that. And its head has a little bit of a highlight to it because of the kind of day. So let's warm it up a little bit from the winter day it was and not go too much on the tint, but keep it that kind of an orangey feel. Now if you notice, I bring down the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, but they only isolate just the areas that you want. When you're working on a black, it doesn't work on the highlights, etc., etc. And there's mid-range, etc. You'll learn how to play with it intuitively as you play with these segments. Now I just use the gradient, that's a tool at the top, and I actually want to affect just his head and the light coming down. I don't want to go too far, and I can isolate the width of it, the position, and the rotation, even after I've dropped it down. Now that helps out a lot for the top of his head. Then I can play a little bit down here with the detail and the sharpening. His hair and the lights and darks, I like to bring the sharpening up. His eyelashes, even the blemishes and the hairline, etc. Bring it up, because then in Photoshop you can bring it down, but then that suit's going to look nice and things that are out of focus aren't going to be touched. You can play a little bit with the other settings, but I think vignetting, etc. isn't necessary for a headshot or for what we're doing here. We're just calibrating and fixing for the problems we had with our camera, our digital camera, in the real environment. I didn't have any extra lighting, and pretty much this is as good as it gets. So now I'm going to go export this image itself, set up the settings for the JPEG. I'll make a new folder, and then in there I'm actually going to put new folder or finishes example 2, right? In there I'm going to save that. It's pretty fast for an export. Then after you're done, go into Photoshop and take a look. In Photoshop, you're going to notice that the image itself is the finished new image that you saved in a new folder. I want to take that finished folder image and put the original image underneath it as well. So I'm going to go to the NYPD folder, copy my folder path, paste it in when I'm trying to go into Photoshop, and now I can go to the finishes and find it. Now there's the finished image, just the colors, not the texture. You'll notice that there's still blemishes, etc. But let's look at the original exposure itself in color, how different it is. It's way better now. See? Look at the before and after. Much better. Same image. The vignetting's still there. My Photoshop just crashed. So now we continue. Back on. Open both images. And I'll show you what the finish looks like. And then I'll go reverse back in the process to make it look a certain way. There's the blemishes, the rosacea, and the cold. And then a little bit of the beard there, and good detail on the beard itself, and the aberration on the lens. Won't touch it, don't need to mess with that, it's fine. Now, if I go into here and I paste in the finished version, you'll see a complete difference. And yet it's still Pete. It's still a finish, it's still the actual person. It's not too blurry everywhere, but it brings more of a production level for what you want for headshots. Now I can use the healing tool and find areas that don't have contrast but look more like the area they are. If you look at the skin and then look at down here by the rosacea and a little bit in the hairlines and the eye lines, the sockets, you want to take something similar but not go too far. Take it from an area that isn't blurry or is blurry in the same three-dimensional plane as the head. Now see that skin? I'm just taking a little bit at a time. Let go, let go, let go. And I'm using a drawing tablet so it makes it easier. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to look at some patterns that actually match and not too blurry. See, if it takes it wrong area, it's going to get lots blurrier, much more blurry than you need it to be. Now I want to stay away from any area that doesn't match the area that I'm cloning from. Well, it's not really cloning, it's artificial intelligence clone and blur and figuring it out. So we kind of leave it in the hands of Photoshop. Then go a little bit further, get rid of some of that little beard extra and a little bit of the rosacea, but not too much. Go to the top, fix the top of that shadow of the top of the eyebrow, and everything should be done. Now what I'm going to do is show you the noise if we use a noise reduction plugin, how bad it makes it look. It just looks like a filter on a camera. That's not the way a headshot should look. So we undo it, make sure that little horn there is on the front, it's gone, smooth that a little bit, and now I can show you that the lint and other areas can be copied if it's in the same vertical angle, horizontal angle, and you can paste it in. And be a little light-handed with this, don't go too crazy. And now the person has almost a perfect jacket, no extra detail. Now I'm going to show you a before and after. And maybe I want to pull back the after a little bit and use an alpha channel at the bottom, and it's white. If I paint with a black paintbrush, it slowly reveals the image below. So I go to about 25% and give the forehead, maybe the eyebrow line, and I show you what the difference is. In a second, you're going to see the alpha channel pop up and what it really looks like. See? So those are the areas we're allowed to see through the finish back to the original. Now if we take that and flatten the image or sandwich it together, we can also save it as a PDF or save it as a Photoshop document first. So we're going to save it as a Photoshop document so we can edit it later on, and then we can export it as a JPEG, or we can now make a new headshot 8 by 10 inches at 300 dots per inch. Copy and paste that image into here, copy it, paste it into here, and it's 18 megapixels, so it fits pretty well, and then just mark it in. Great headshot, a little bit of headspace at the top. Now I want to paint that at the top out of the way. I really want to get that cup out of the way so I get a sample of the white, paint it out at 75%, and I'm good. Then I want to use the healing tool, healing brush, and healing brush the blurry background on top of itself at the same angle. Luckily that works. There's a space that would work. That's pretty much it. So now I can just save it as, flatten the image, save it as a PDF from Photoshop, call it a headshot, send it out to Kinko's or bring it with me on a little memory stick, and keep the compression at maximum, and you're going to see the file size difference. So the JPEG is about 1.5 megs. The PSD is 76 and the PDF's 5.5. So you didn't lose that much detail in the PDF. Maybe a little bit of banding, but the printing won't. You're never going to see a difference.